There is a garden bed in the American Southwest, unremarkable from a distance. No raised timber frames. No irrigation lines. No bags of synthetic fertilizers stacked beside it. Just 3 crops, sharing the same patch of earth, the same handful of soil, the same summer sky. And yet this bed produces more food per square foot than most modern gardens triple its size. It does not need daily watering. It does not collapse when rain refuses to come. It does not roll out the welcome mat for the insects that devastate single-crop rows. It is called the Three Sisters. And somewhere between the invention of the sprinkler system and the rise of the big-box garden center, modern gardeners quietly walked away from the most sophisticated companion planting system ever devised, a method refined over thousands of years of careful, cumulative observation by Native American communities across a continent. The question is not whether it works. Science has already answered that. The question is, why did we stop? Long before European settlers arrived in North America, indigenous peoples across what is now the United States, Mexico, and Canada had developed a planting system so ecologically precise that agricultural scientists still study it today. The Haudenosaunee, the Cherokee, the Hopi, the Lenape, across dozens of distinct nations and climates, all practice some variation of the same core method. 3 crops. 1 bed. Each plant doing something the others cannot. Corn, beans, squash. Not planted in separate rows. Not rotated out in isolation year after year. Planted together, in the same mound of earth, timed with deliberate precision, so that each plant actively served the next. This was not coincidence or folk habit. It was a food production system built through generations of watching, adjusting, and remembering what worked and what didn't. Archaeologists have found evidence of Three Sisters cultivation dating back over 5,000 years. 5,000 years. The fertilizer companies now advertising on gardening channels have existed for, at most, 100. Among the Haudenosaunee, the Iroquois Confederacy of what is now upstate New York and southern Ontario, the Three Sisters were not simply a farming method. They were embedded in cosmology. The 3 crops were understood as living spirits, inseparable gifts, entrusted to the people as long as the people cared for the land in return. Agricultural knowledge was held by women, passed from mother to daughter across generations with the precision of a technical manual. Planting schedules, mound spacing, seed selection, soil reading, all of it encoded in oral tradition and demonstrated in practice, refined over centuries through direct observation rather than theory. The Haudenosaunee did not guess which seeds produced the strongest plants. They saved them deliberately across hundreds of growing seasons. In the arid Southwest, the Hopi faced a different set of constraints and arrived at the same essential answer through a different path. Farming on the Colorado Plateau, an environment that would defeat most modern agricultural systems within a season, required practices far more sophisticated than the monoculture row could offer. Hopi corn varieties were selected over millennia for deep root development, capable of drawing moisture from far below the surface in soils that received as little as 10 inches of rainfall annually. Their planting mounds were positioned and spaced to capture runoff from seasonal rains, functioning as passive irrigation without a single pipe or pump. The Three Sisters in Hopi practice was not a companion planting trick. It was a complete dryland farming system, one that kept entire communities fed in a landscape where the margin for error was measured in survival. And yet the fertilizer bag remains most gardeners' first instinct. The soil, the living, communicating, self-regulating system beneath our feet, comes last if it comes at all. How the Three Sisters actually work. These 3 plants are not simply placed near each other for convenience. They operate as a closed ecological system, each one solving a problem the others create, each one filling a gap the others leave open. The corn grows tall first. It becomes the vertical scaffold, a living pole reaching upward. Corn is planted first and given 2 to 3 weeks of lead time, allowing it to establish its root system and begin climbing before the second sister arrives. It offers nothing directly to the soil. What it offers is structure. The beans follow. They spiral up the corn stalk, using it for support while quietly doing some of the most important biological work in the garden. Beans are nitrogen fixers. Through a symbiotic relationship with soil bacteria called rhizobium, they pull atmospheric nitrogen into nodules on their roots and deposit it back into the ground as usable fertilizer, feeding the corn and squash without any external input. A University of Michigan study confirmed what Native American farmers had known for millennia. Companion-planted plots with nitrogen-fixing legumes showed soil nitrogen levels nearly 40% higher than monoculture plots after just one growing season. The beans were replenishing exactly what the corn was consuming, rebuilding the soil, season after season at no cost. Then the squash spreads low. Its wide, rough leaves cover the soil surface like a living mulch, blocking sunlight from weeds, sealing moisture into the earth, and reducing the need for watering by shading the ground from direct sun. The coarse, almost bristly texture of squash leaves deters the soft-bodied insects and pests that prefer smooth surfaces. The squash does not grow up. It grows out, claiming the horizontal layer while the corn claims the vertical and the beans work the invisible chemistry of the air. 3 plants. 3 layers. 3 ecological problems solved by 3 strategies, in one bed. What modern gardening got wrong? When European agricultural practices spread across the continent, they brought with them something that looked like efficiency: the monoculture row. 1 crop, 1 row, repeated across the entire field. It made harvesting with machinery simpler. It made pesticide application more uniform. It made everything measurable, predictable, and, critically, profitable for the companies selling inputs. But monocultures are ecologically brittle. Remove the fertilizer and yields collapse. Remove the pesticide and pests move in unchallenged because nothing else is growing nearby to disrupt their patterns or attract their predators. Let the irrigation fail and the bare exposed soil between rows desiccates within days. Here is the mistake most home gardeners make. They plant one thing in one place, then spend the entire season fighting the consequences. They add nitrogen because they depleted it. They water daily because the soil dries out. They spray for aphids because there is nothing nearby to attract the predators that eat aphids. Every intervention is a reaction to a problem that the garden itself created, because it was designed without relationships. The 3 Sisters does not eliminate work. It redistributes it back to the plants themselves where it belongs. How to plant it the right way. Most first-time 3 Sisters planters make the same set of predictable errors. Understanding them before you dig is the difference between a system that thrives and one that confirms your suspicion that ancient methods sound better in theory than they work in practice. Mistake number 1. Planting all 3 at once. The corn must go in first. Give it a full 2 weeks, sometimes 3 in cooler climates, before the beans go in. If beans and corn start simultaneously, the beans will attempt to climb a stalk that is not yet strong enough to support them, and the whole structure collapses before it begins. Patience here is not optional, it is the mechanism. Mistake number 2, using flat rows instead of mounds. The 3 Sisters require raised mounds, not flat rows. Build each mound roughly 12 inches high and 18 inches across, spacing them about 4 feet apart from center to center. Plant 4 or 5 corn seeds in the center. Once the corn reaches 6 to 8 inches, place 4 bean seeds around it, roughly 6 inches from the stalk. Once the beans are established, plant 2 or 3 squash seeds at the outer edge of each mound, thinning later to the strongest plant. Mistake number 3, choosing the wrong squash. Many gardeners default to zucchini. It will grow, but it is not the best choice. Traditional plantings used large spreading varieties, butternut, acorn, or Hubbard, whose broader leaves provide far superior ground coverage. Remember, the squash's primary role in this system is not to produce the heaviest yield. It is to protect the soil. Choose the variety that does that job best. Mistake number 4, planting into dead soil. The 3 Sisters thrive in loose, biologically active, well-drained soil. If your garden has been tilled repeatedly and treated with synthetic inputs, its microbial ecosystem may be too depleted to support the nitrogen-fixing bacteria that make the beans effective. If that is the case, spend a season rebuilding first, add compost, reduce compaction, and let the earthworm population recover before you attempt the system. The bacteria and the beans need each other, and both need a living soil to work in. Mistake number 5. Forgetting the fourth sister. Not all indigenous traditions stopped at 3. Among some communities, including certain Haudenosaunee and Rocky Mountain peoples, a fourth plant was integrated along the northern edge of the planting bed, Rocky Mountain bee plant, Cleome cerulata, or in other regions, sunflowers. The logic was ecological and entirely deliberate. Bee plant produced abundant nectar that drew native pollinators directly into the garden when the corn was shedding pollen, a critical window in which pollination rates determine yield. Sunflowers served a second purpose. Their tall, seed-heavy heads attracted the birds that would otherwise strip young corn ears, drawing them away from the crop and toward an easier, more visible target at the garden's perimeter. The fourth sister was, in essence, a decoy and a welcome mat simultaneously, managing the wildlife around the garden with the same quiet intelligence that the three sisters managed the soil within it. In a home garden, a single row of sunflowers along the north edge, where they will not shade the bed, accomplishes both functions with minimal effort and considerable beauty. A note on varieties and harvest realities. There is one more thing that no romanticized account of the three sisters mentions, and it matters. This system was not designed for the modern backyard vegetable garden with its sweet corn, snap beans, and zucchini. It was designed for storage crops. Flour or flint corn that dries hard on the stalk, dry shelling beans that cure on the vine, and winter squash whose thick skin allows it to keep in a root cellar for months. These are crops built for harvest at the end of the season, once, in a single pass, not crops that require you to walk through the bed every 3 days picking before they overripen. If you plant sweet corn in a Three Sisters bed, you will be attempting to harvest delicate ears inside a dense, tangled canopy of bean vines and sprawling squash leaves. That is not failure. That is what the system is supposed to look like from the outside. By midsummer, a properly planted Three Sisters bed is an intentional jungle, layered, overlapping, deliberately impenetrable. The squash does not leave you a tidy path. That is its function, to seal the soil, block the weeds, and discourage anything that walks on 2 or 4 legs from wandering through. If you want to grow sweet corn or snap beans, grow them in separate rows where you can access them freely. Reserve the Three Sisters bed for its traditional purpose, a single abundant harvest of storable food gathered in autumn when everything has dried in place and the growing season is done. What science confirms? For decades, Western agricultural science treated the Three Sisters as an interesting artifact, worthy of documentation, perhaps, but not rigorous enough to take seriously as a model. That view has changed substantially over the past 30 years, as polyculture research has produced data that monoculture advocates find difficult to dismiss. Researchers at Cornell University found that Three Sisters plots, when properly established, consistently outperform monoculture plots in land equivalent ratio, a measure of how efficiently a given area produces food. Their data indicated that 1 acre of Three Sisters cultivation produces the caloric equivalent of 1.3 to 1.5 acres of separately grown monoculture corn or beans. A separate study published in Agronomy for Sustainable Development found that nitrogen accumulation in Three Sisters companion plots reduced external nitrogen inputs by over 30% compared to control plots. The beans were performing the work of synthetic fertilizer, silently, season after season, for free. There is no profit in a nitrogen-fixing bean root. And that, perhaps, explains why this system never made it into the mainstream gardening curriculum. The squash data is equally compelling. Soil moisture retention in Three Sisters plots was measurably higher than in bare soil monoculture plots under identical conditions. During drought stress periods, the squash canopy significantly reduced evaporation, a resilience advantage that drip irrigation can approximate but never fully replicate, particularly on a cost-per-growing season basis. The deeper lesson: strip away the science and the history, and what remains is a principle so straightforward it almost sounds obvious. A garden designed around relationships is more resilient than one designed around isolation. The Three Sisters works because it does not ask any single plant to carry the entire system. The corn does not fix nitrogen. The beans do not shade the ground. The squash does not provide vertical structure. Each is permitted to do one thing well, and in doing so, enables the others to do the same. This is not a metaphor. It is engineering. Modern gardening, like modern agriculture at scale, was built on the premise that complexity is a problem to be solved by simplification. Monoculture was an attempt to make nature legible to machines. It worked at the cost of soil health, biodiversity, and any garden's capacity to sustain itself without constant external input. In a home garden, that trade-off is absurd. You do not own a combine harvester. You are not managing 5,000 acres. You have a bed, a mound, a plot of backyard earth. And in that space, the intelligence encoded in the Three Sisters is not just accessible, it is optimal. The knowledge was never lost. It was set aside. And it can be picked back up.